Greetings. Welcome to PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series. My name is Caitlin Rose-Seiler, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or SKPCAP. Today, Ryan Fisher and Ryan Oram from the Royal Saskatchewan Museum will be speaking about the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, a hub of prairie research and collections. I'd like to start by stating we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I'd like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. Before we begin, I'd like to note that PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series is a monthly presentation about anything to do with native prairie conservation or species at risk. You can register for our future webinars on the PCAP website, and we have one coming up on July 30th about migratory birds and the Redberry Lake Biosphere Region update. Most of our past webinar presentations have been recorded and can be found on the PCAP YouTube channel. This webinar will be uploaded there in the near future as well. A reminder to our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type into the questions section of the webinar dashboard at any time during the presentation, and questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. I'd like to take a moment to note that financial support for today's webinar has been provided by our presenting sponsors, Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association, North American Helium, Nutrien, Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association, and SaskTel. In-kind support has been provided by the RSM. And I'd like to make a special mention that Sask Energy is a sponsor of the Native Prairie Appreciation Week. And special today, Ashley Sergianis from Sask Energy will be bringing greetings.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashley Sergianis. I am the Manager of Environmental Assessments and Approvals at Sask Energy. I am pleased to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of Sask Energy and to support PCAP and the Native Prairie Appreciation Week. This week is filled with a number of great initiatives and activities to showcase appreciation for native prairie. Sask Energy prioritizes safety, environmental stewardship, and affordability as we deliver natural gas to 93% of Saskatchewan communities and more than 400,000 customers. Supporting the Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan is particularly important to Sask Energy because of the nature of our operations. We take the restoration and reclamation of disturbed natural environments very seriously when installing new pipelines in Saskatchewan, because we know that the first step in protecting all species begins with protecting the habitat. Thank you for having me here today, and on behalf of Sask Energy, I hope that you enjoy this interesting and informative webinar.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters. We have Ryan Oram and Ryan Fisher, and I've also got indicated bees and birds there by their name. So first of all, Ryan Fisher is the Curator of Vertebrate Zoology at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum and has been conducting research on prairie birds for the last 20 plus years. He's had the good fortune to do research on everything from songbirds to owls and hawks in southern Saskatchewan and Alberta. Ryan Oram, they/them, is the Curatorial Assistant of Invertebrate Zoology at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum with a specialty in native bee and wasp species of Canada and North America. They also have an interest in doing high-quality photos for both research and exhibit-based research. So with that, I'll pass it over to Ryan and Ryan.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. We'll see if everything works as it should here.
Perfect.
Oh, maybe a bit frozen here. Just a second. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I am Ryan Fisher, birds.
And I'm Ryan Oram, bees.
And thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today on a summer day here in Regina. It's a little cloudy and rainy, so good day for a seminar over the noon hour. We thought we would just start giving you a little bit of background about the museum. So the RSM was established in 1906. We are actually currently part of the Ministry of Parks, Culture and Sport in the Saskatchewan provincial government. There's several different groups and employees at the Royal Saskatchewan Museum, but the Research and Collections group is probably the most relevant to PCAP's activities, but that's not to take away from the amazing work that our programming staff does on education and outreach, and all of the folks that work on the exhibits at the main Royal Saskatchewan Museum building. So most of you hopefully have made a visit to Regina and have gone into this building. I think it's personally an amazing exhibit or exhibition of Saskatchewan's biodiversity. You can essentially walk through all of the ecoregions and see the amazing biodiversity that we have in the province. But I would say that Ryan and I agree that the real magic, at least from a research and collections point of view, happens across the street. Not a lot of people know that there's another museum kind of right across the street from the main museum building, and that's where both Ryan and I spend our days. So Ryan and I are in the research and collections unit, and our main mandate is to collect, study, and preserve specimens, artifacts, and information about Saskatchewan's natural history and Indigenous cultures. Our second mandate is to interpret and communication of that knowledge to Saskatchewan's general public. And then we're also engaged in a lot of research on Saskatchewan's natural history and Indigenous cultures. Of course, today, Ryan and I are really going to be speaking about the proportion of the museum's work that deals with natural history. Oh.
Exciting time.
Here we go. So we're going to talk about these a little bit more in depth throughout our presentation. So the RSM has a collection of both vertebrates and invertebrates. In addition to that, we have a collection of a botany collection, plants, obviously. We also have a very large collection of paleontology items, dinosaurs, insects in amber, that type of thing. We also have a large Indigenous cultural heritage collection and a extremely large archaeology collection here at the museum. So these are kind of our main 6 different types of collections. And like I said, Ryan and I will be kind of focusing today on just the vertebrate and invertebrate collections. All right, so let's jump right into the vertebrate zoology collection. So the vertebrate zoology collection, obviously anything that has a backbone sort of falls in the vertebrate zoology collection. Our collection is primarily specimens coming from the wild here in Saskatchewan. And really the point of the collection is to represent vertebrate diversity in Saskatchewan over time and space, and make that information available to a wide base of users. So to give you an idea, the map on the right shows where all of the bird specimens in our collection have come from. So really targeted and focused in Saskatchewan, but we do also have specimens from all over Canada, some in the US, and a little bit further beyond as well. But really our main mandate is to provide that snapshot of vertebrate diversity over space and time in Saskatchewan. So our current vertebrate collection consists of about just over 9,900 birds, representing 421 species. About 3,700 mammals, representing 126 species, 105 species of reptiles and amphibians, about 600 individual specimens of those, and about 357 fish, representing about 64 species. And so, again, like I said, these are specimens from all over Saskatchewan, generally from our border with the US up to the border with NWT and both eastern and western borders. So a fairly comprehensive collection of animals here in Saskatchewan. We also have a very large collection of owl pellets. There was a research project that went on here at the RSM a few years ago that collected a bunch of owl pellets from burrowing owls, great horned owls, and a few other species. So we have about 10,000 owl pellets that represent about 80 to 90,000 small mammals. So each of those owl pellets could have a deer mouse in it and a few other things. And that's all been cataloged and is all stored here at the RSM. We also have a pretty comprehensive egg collection representing about 150 different species. We have all of their eggs there. And we also have a small collection of bird nests as well, ranging from your smallest little hummingbird in a little jar to large nests like mud nests built by nesting grebes and things like that. So quite a diverse collection ranging from individual animals themselves to parts or eggs or nests. So you might be kind of asking yourself, well, where do these specimens come from? And at least in the vertebrate zoology collection, historically, specimens were actively collected. So the person in my same position probably 30, 40 years ago would potentially go out with a shotgun and collect birds specifically for addition to the museum collection. And we generally don't actively collect vertebrates anymore. Lots of current issues with that. So our collection primarily increases via donations. We receive donations from academics if the work that they're doing may result in the death of animals. We get those animals donated to the museum. We have a really close relationship with the Ministry of Environment and conservation officers. So if the general public goes into a regional office and brings in a hawk or an owl, we generally get those items donated to the museum, or if conservation officers take animals in through investigations or something like that, we also get those at the museum. We have a great relationship with Salthaven and Living Sky Wildlife Rehabilitation in Saskatchewan. So if an animal is brought in and unfortunately doesn't make it through the rehabilitation process, they are fantastic at donating all of those things to the museum. We also have a really good relationship with a couple citizen science groups in Regina and Saskatoon that do window strike monitoring in downtowns in the spring and fall migrations. And so any dead birds that they find are brought directly to us. And we do also take donations from the general public. And I'll talk a little bit at the end of my section about how you can do that. So we really do rely on external sources to bring us animals to add to the collection. So when animals are brought into the collection, the primary way that we store them here is via study skins. So that's the picture on the top left, the ducks. These kind of maintain all of the information that's relevant to researchers. So maintains the plumage or the fur. You can see the external coloration. It provides tissue samples in the forms of fur or toe pads or things like that, with the added benefit that it doesn't take a lot of room to store a ton of these specimens as study skins. The other way that we do store things sometimes is through lifelike taxidermy mounts. These provide almost the exact same information as the study skins, but they do have the downfall that they take a really long time to make and make nicely, and they take a really large amount of space to store. Now, the other thing in the bottom left-hand corner, we get lots of people calling us who say, you know, I've got this bird, but it's not in really great shape. Do you still want it? And for the most part, we will take things like that and convert them into skeletons, which provides excellent information for, you know, studying morphology of animals, doing measurements of bones and things like that. So a lot of the critters at the museum, if they aren't going to make a good study skin or a taxidermy mount, they're converted into skeletons with the help of flesh-eating beetles. Our reptiles, amphibians, and fish are typically stored in alcohol jars, and like you would typically see in most every lab. The other interesting thing that we've been doing for the last several years is that any animal that's added to the collection, we take a small sample of heart, muscle, and liver tissue, and those are stored indefinitely for research purposes in our -80 freezer. So we kind of preserve all parts of the animal in the collection. And you know, this is sort of where we think that, you know, it's unfortunate that an animal has died for whatever reason, but we can kind of give it second life here at the museum for research purposes, whether that's for conservation or management or just kind of pure research interest. So just some interesting highlights. Our oldest specimen in the vertebrate collection is actually a chestnut-colored longspur, collected in 1905, kind of a nice prairie species there. This is kind of an interesting one. We have a few specimens of greater prairie chicken, which is now extirpated in Saskatchewan. The one in the picture here was from Quill Lake, collected in 1929. We have quite a few specimens of greater sage grouse. This one was collected in Maple Creek, or near Maple Creek, which is a little bit further north than where they're currently found in the province. And then we do have quite a few more rare species that are currently here in Saskatchewan, like the sage thrasher. This one collected in East End. The picture is not of our collection. That's just a wild sage thrasher. But you're probably asking yourself, well, what's sort of the reason of why museums keep all of these study skins and taxidermy mounts? Well, we tend to be an excellent resource for research purposes. So we worked with researchers, for example, on the top left, who are looking at wildlife population structures. In this case, sort of the different populations of Canada jays and woodpeckers. In the bottom right corner, we've recently provided samples to Environment and Climate Change Canada, who are looking at contaminants in aerial insectivores. So it's really a great situation where you can look at, for example, contaminants of a bird in a museum from the 1940s or 50s and compare that to birds that you're currently catching right now. We've recently sent some samples to the government of Alberta and the University of Lethbridge, who are trying to identify sage-grouse predators. And so they'll swab DNA from sage-grouse remains and then try to match it up with DNA samples of predators that we've provided them. And the most recent one, we're providing some samples to the University of Saskatchewan, who are looking at disease prevalence and presence in small mammals here in Saskatchewan. So, really with the study skins, the taxidermies, and the tissue samples, the sky is kind of the limit now with what technology can accomplish from really, really small amounts of tissue from wildlife. The other thing that we do a lot of is education and outreach in vertebrate zoology. And so we recently launched a new website called the Bird Eggs of Canada, www.birdeggsofcanada.ca. And we have photos of over 370 eggs of different species. And so you can go in there and look at all the different hawk eggs, look at all the different small perching bird eggs, and try to figure out what egg you might have found while you're out in the field. So we're hopefully going to be adding to that website, adding more species as we go. But we figured we had a pretty good baseline of animals in there for people to get a good idea of egg diversity and be able to try to match up eggs they find in the field with eggs on the website. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. The collection is also, we've also had a concerted effort in the last few years to make our collection a little bit more accessible to other users besides research. And so we've run a few sketching days through the Art Gallery of Regina and Black Dog Art Supply, where we bring in a wildlife taxidermy mount and people spend 2 or 3 hours sketching that particular animal. So it gives people an up-close look at some critters that you might not normally see, right in your hand or right next to your hand. The other thing that we do in vertebrate zoology is all of the data on the locations of where our specimens come from are shared publicly via the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, or gbif.org. So if you are interested in seeing where animals in our collection and what we have in the collection, you can visit that GBIF website and download all of the data. And so please feel free to do that. And if there are any questions about that, please feel free to get in touch with us. So the other main focus, in addition to collections, that both Ryan and I are involved with at the museum, is conducting research mainly in prairie Saskatchewan. So myself, I collaborate a lot with a couple professors at the University of Regina to lead research projects in Saskatchewan, and we do venture out of our borders a little bit into Alberta and Manitoba and elsewhere in Canada, and the world for that matter. My research program is really built around understanding bird and mammal responses to human alterations of the prairie ecosystem and climate change and weather. So I'll talk about those just a little bit, and then I will be quiet and hand it over to Ryan. So my research is really focused, as I mentioned, on things that we do to the prairie and how wildlife responds either positively or negatively. So I've had the good fortune to do some past research projects on ferruginous hawk, burrowing owl, Sprague's pipit, and sharp-tailed grouse, and sort of the impacts of human infrastructure on them in prairie Canada. We recently started up a new project on orange kangaroo rat in western Saskatchewan and eastern Alberta to kind of understand a little bit how disturbance or lack thereof on dune habitats are influencing that species. And then recently had the good fortune to work with another graduate student looking at great horned owls, that species quite opposite from the other ones that do extremely, extremely well in prairie Canada. And so my research is really focused on understanding habitat use, reproductive success, connectivity of prairie habitat for endangered species, and also getting into a little bit of work looking at population structure of some of these critters. I also do have another student who's looking at the impacts of urbanization on prairie wildlife, which is kind of a new threat on the landscape that maybe we haven't looked at quite enough yet. So that's an exciting new project that we have on the go. The other angle of my research that I'm interested in is how extreme weather currently influences grassland birds, and specifically how it influences their reproductive success, their nest survival, and things like that, but also how that influences their decisions to return back to certain areas that may have been flooded one year or may have experienced extreme heat and extreme cold. So again, kind of working on a subset of endangered species here in the province to understand how current weather is influencing them and how that might translate into the future with a changing climate. So I have one slide left, and then it's Ryan's, the other Ryan show. So as I mentioned, we do take donations from the general public. If you can identify it, we will probably take it. So in order to do that, obviously use gloves when handling the critter or shovel or something. Don't handle it if you do suspect disease. Place the dead animal in a container. Plastic bag is usually what a lot of people do. And the following is really, really important. We need the date and the location of where you found the animal. If the animal comes in and it doesn't have that information, we will generally discard it because it's not super useful from our perspective. And then you can come to the front desk. Generally after 3 p.m. they like to receive donations from the public, but you can come to the main museum and drop them off there, or feel free to contact me if you do find anything. It's amazing. We've had people find swift fox who have donated them, and find other things, and really that's like I mentioned, our only way to increase our collection. So with that, I will happily turn it over to Ryan to take over for the rest of the talk.
Okay. So my specialty is more on the creepy crawlies of the world, specifically Canada and North America, more broader than just Saskatchewan. The invertebrate collection has two kind of mandates. The primary one is being getting specimens relevant to Saskatchewan, border to border, kind of around the edges. But we also have a special collection mandate of being a center for bee excellency across North America, which I will dive way more into later on. But first, we'll just talk about more of the general invertebrate stuff. So currently our numbers are, we have about almost 300,000 insects, 3,500 spiders, 100 mollusks, 100 crustaceans, and then 174 other invertebrates, which would be like parasites that actually come from this Ryan's birds and mammals, millipedes, centipedes, all that kind of stuff. All of those account for like thousands of species in the collection, as well as the reason why we have so many is a big part of museums is we're not a hockey card collection. Having one record doesn't really tell us anything. You want like a whole series of them. So as you can see in the middle picture there, a bunch of one species, all collected from different times of the year, times of like temporally throughout different years, as well as space. So you get a really good picture of everything that's happening. So here we have a little graph that just shows number of specimens collected per year. So like back in the 1879, we had like one specimen. As you can see, it gets a bit busier as time goes on. Some fun points on that is 2012 was when our curator of invertebrate zoology currently was hired. And that's when our museum switched to being more bees and wasps. 2013, this huge spike is when the RSM conducted the BioBlitz. So there was just a bunch of stuff out. They hired so many people to just go out all across the province and collecting things. 2017 and 2018 are both represented by the second spike, which is when we conducted another BioBlitz, as well as the year that I started. So not to brag, but I contributed a lot apparently. And we also had a province-wide collection event all throughout 2018 where we were setting up traps throughout the whole summer, collecting bees and wasps. But that brings us to the special collection, which is our bees and wasps. So our aim is to become a center of excellency of bee research and knowledge, as well as a bit on wasps, trying to get a bunch of everything. Right now, we are only second to the Canadian National Collection in the country for our number of specimens and our diversity and range. So kind of cool. And here is a graph showing the exact same things, but just of the bees and wasps. So kind of shows the same trend. And when it's overlaid on top of the invertebrates one, you can see that after Corey started, our collection has 100% been dominated by bees and wasps. Those little spikes before Corey started were mostly butterflies and moths and beetles, because that's what the person before Corey specialized on. This map here just shows the North American range of our bee and wasp collection. So it's a bit more widespread than just Saskatchewan. Obviously, there is a hotspot in Saskatchewan. We have a collaborator in BC that does a lot of collecting for us. Like a big portion of our collection is BC material. Nova Scotia is where Corey did his PhD and master's, so a lot from there. There's a little dot down in Arizona. There's something called the bee course that happens down there, and we all go down there at least once in our lifetime here at the museum. So there's a bunch of specimens from there as well. And Florida is because the director of research and collections goes down there for his winter vacations. So we have specimens from there. Our goal is to eventually fill this. We want specimens from all over North America. We don't want like any white. So that is our long-term goal. Like the egg website, the curator of Invertebrate, Corey, has a Bees of Canada website. If you want it, there next to 3 slides will have a QR code that you can scan to get to it. It has like a general intro of bees on the front page, but then once you get into the species, it goes into a lot of detail about their taxonomy, the history of the species and everything with photos, so you can help try to identify them, as well as their like biology. So if they are social, where they nest, if they have any specialized plants that they feed on, as well as distributions are all there. It's a website that's still being worked on like actively. We're currently working on a part to add a key so people can actually use it to try to identify things down to a genus level. So then they can go to the genus page and look at all the species. So it's a pretty good resource. The crop preference in that would be for farmers. The taxonomy stuff would be for researchers, distributions for anyone doing population studies. On top of that, we do also do research in entomology. One of the big ones is diversity studies. So unlike vertebrate zoology, who gets donations as most of their stuff, we actually actively go out and collect things using nets and different kinds of trapping methods, and then bring it all back and pin it all, and it takes forever, but then we get cool things out of it. So we do a lot of diversity sampling for Saskatchewan and then collaborations across Canada to get other stuff. In the 2 pictures, we have a bee that was first found in Saskatchewan in 2014 by Corey. And then on the bottom picture is this ant species that we just found in Saskatchewan of a harvester ant just last summer. So like we're actively finding new things every time we go out. Like it's never a dull day here in the summer because it's like, oh, we went out, we found a new species for the province. Cool. On top of that, we also do taxonomy research. So myself and Corey are both taxonomists by nature. So we are actively describing new species for science every now and again, especially Corey. He's world renowned for it. And in the picture here, you have one that was found in 2011, described in 2013 of a new species of bee from Cuba, which really shows the breadth of our around the world stuff and our camera setup, which is what we use to take all the pretty pictures so people can actually see the structures they're supposed to be looking at when they're IDing things. We also do pollination research. So one of my colleagues here used to be an entomologist until she turned to the dark side of birds. She did her master's in pollination, which is seen here on Haskap pollination. A lot of times farmers are buying bees and that to put out in their fields, but they might not necessarily be needed because the native bees are so much diverse in the province and able to do a lot of the work for us. In the prairies alone, there's probably over 400 species of bees. You don't need the one species of honeybee all the time. And then another more interesting off way is insect pathology. So we had a master's student, PhD student gone through who did cut open all the little tiny bees and took out their stomach contents and that, and found that the males in the species that are declining have a like yeast infection. We don't know if that's why they're declining. There's no, like the studies need to be further to see if there's a correlation there. But yeah, it's only the males, and in their little like above their stomach, there's a little structure that will have a yeast infection develop. And it was a new species of yeast that got described from that. So that's pretty much all I have for entomology. I could go on forever, but I try to cut it down a bit on these things. So if you do have any questions and follow up for me or Ryan, our emails are there, as well as the website for the biology department for the museum. That's it.
Thank you so much. Both of you, fabulous, very informative presentation. The amount of work that you guys have been doing, the amount of collections stuff that the RSM has is unbelievable. I'm trying to take a few notes here. Like, I think I wrote down almost 10,000 birds, almost 300,000 insects. Like, it's just unbelievable. So thank you. Thanks for sharing all of this information with us. I just want to let our audience know that Ryan Oram mentioned two people, or I saw the two names, Danae Fryer and Kristen Palmier. They've both done webinars for us in the past. I think Danae's was several years ago, and those are on our YouTube channel. So if anyone's interested in learning more about those, they can check that out there. So we do have some questions already from our attendees, and I'll try my best to direct it to the appropriate person. So the first couple questions are for Ryan Fisher. And an attendee's wondering if for donating animals, does the museum accept them via mail if they're prepared and packaged in a cool pack and expedited?
Yeah, we would do that for sure. Yeah, absolutely. We do have the ability, though. We do try to get out to different parts of the province every year. So if there is something that you have, I'd encourage you to give me a call first or an email. And if we're planning to be in the area, we can easily meet up and grab it for you. So that tends to be a little bit easier than mailing things.
That sounds good. Yeah. And then the
Good.
next question, I think for you as well, Ryan. Ryan Fisher, have your studies noticed further decline in the population of hognose and or other snakes and prairie reptiles due to changes in habitat or climate or humans?
It's a really good question. So that was actually the curator of vertebrate zoology before I arrived, Ray Poulin, who did all of the snake work in Saskatchewan. And I think most of that research is kind of wrapped up in the last couple of years. So I can't speak specifically about snakes, but if you do have a question, I can put you in touch with Ray, who would be more than happy to chat with you about snakes for a really long time.
Ray's done a few speaker series for us in the past too, and very knowledgeable about snakes. Is he still with the museum?
He's our boss right now. So
Okay, so not a curator anymore. Okay.
that's right. Yeah.
He's the one that collects our Florida specimens for us.
Oh, right on. And then for Ryan Oram, do you collaborate with the University of Calgary Bee and Insect Collections?
Myself personally, not so much. Corey, the curator, kind of collaborates with everyone. I do most of the behind the scenes and the field work part, and then Corey does the people part. So
Okay, perfect. To all of our attendees out there, if you have any questions, just type it into the Q&A section of the webinar dashboard. I noticed a few people have their hands raised because we have a lot of people on. Just type it in there and I'll moderate the questions there. You'll be muted for the duration of the webinar, unfortunately. So next question is from Haley. For Ryan Fisher. And she says, "Hi, Ryan. I got to do spotlight surveys for Ord's kangaroo rats with you many years ago. And I was wondering how the populations have been doing lately."
So we're actually just starting the Ord's Kangaroo Rat project right now with a new graduate student, Jessie Bainbridge. So she's going to be predominantly working within CFB Suffield in Alberta and just on some crown land north of CFB Suffield. So they are definitely still present in that particular area. We are going out into Saskatchewan to try to revisit some of the old dune sites where kangaroo rats were observed in the past, and there haven't been surveys for them in the last little while. So you might see us out the first week of July and maybe a bit into August doing some nightlight surveys in Saskatchewan to try to see if they're still occupying some of the old dune sites where they were observed 20 or 30 years ago. So
Awesome. That's really interesting. You can't find them if you're not looking for them, right?
yeah, exactly. And as people know, one of the big threats is kind of dune stabilization. So without grazing, without fire, those little kangaroo rats don't do very well. And so we're kind of keen and excited to get out to some of the dunes, specifically in Saskatchewan, where they've been observed quite a few years ago, but no one's looked for a little while.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We'll follow up on that in a year or two and see how you've made, what kind of progress you've made, because it'd be really interesting to know more.
Absolutely. I'm sure Jesse would love to give a presentation.
I've already made a note.
Excellent.
And then Ryan Oram, how many species of mollusks and other aquatic invertebrate does the museum have on hand?
For mollusks, it's probably around in like the 10s to 20s, possibly. It's a pretty small collection. For other aquatics like snails, it's quite a bit bigger. I don't have the full number of that one off the top of my head, but we also that's another one that we get a collaboration with BC. We had a grad student doing hot spring snails a few years back. That was pretty cool from northern BC. So the snails, we definitely have quite a bit more of the aquatic side of thing, but I don't have an actual number because I don't know which species are aquatic versus terrestrial for them. So, and then crustaceans, we only have. Well, I can't say we only have because there's a few small fairy shrimp in that, but it's probably in the 10s to 20s again. So maybe like upwards to 50 or so
Okay.
of all of the
Okay.
aquatics.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. And then since we're on you, Haley's wondering what's the best way to store invert species, specifically moths, before submitting them?
For anything, it's mostly freezer.
Okay.
So just stick them in your freezer, put them in a little container, put them in there and bring them to us. Then we'll kind of decide which direction to go, either pinning it or putting it in ethanol. So yeah, freezer is the way to go. It also is like one of the more humane ways of actually killing. If it was like getting close to death and you want to just kind of put it out of his misery, freezers just put them to sleep and then they're gone in a day or so. So
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. And do you ever like report back to people about what species it was or anything like that, or maybe just don't have the capacity for it?
if they want to know it, we will definitely report back. Some people just drop it off and they don't really care for the follow-up. Other people do. Sometimes we might have to say, like, hey, we got it, really cool. We won't know for a while. We'll let you know when we do. Depends on the group and what it is, because both me and Corey are bee and wasp specialists. So some of the other groups, we might have to reach out to other colleagues across North America to get their help on what it is.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that answer. And then the question, I guess, whoever wants to jump in here, there's a couple questions that have come in here. One attendee would like to know, what is your overall approach to get Indigenous involvement in museums? I don't know if you can speak to that part.
Yeah, that might be a question better for Indigenous engagement or our Indigenous cultural heritage curator. I know she is working a lot with Indigenous communities and repatriation and things like that for that particular collection.
Okay. And would there be support for Indigenous communities if they have interest to be part of the collection samples of insects and other animals?
So one thing I know that both my curator, Corey, and our Indigenous cultural heritage curator has talked about before is working with communities to go and look at like what pollinators and that are in their areas, and then working with them to like kind of get their knowledge and more like Western New Age knowledge kind of thing together so we can really understand it, because the knowledge they have is unparalleled, and being able to tie that all together is something really big. So that is something that they have been talking about. It's just actually getting it off the ground and going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, be really neat. Awesome. And then a listener named Henry is wondering if Saskatchewan has something similar to the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, ABMI.
Unfortunately, no. So that is one unfortunate thing here, is we don't sort of have an overarching organization that does biodiversity monitoring. We all have our separate little chunks, I think, and collaborations that try to put it all together, but no equivalent to ABMI. Yeah. The closest is probably the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center and us. We're kind of the two big organizations that keep track of species occurrences and taxonomy and things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know the Saskatchewan Data Center does quite a bit of work with conservation and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then regarding the kind of Indigenous communities and collections, would you support shared ownership of samples with Indigenous communities?
Yeah.
It's definitely been a talk in like some in like my circle of like the collections managers, curatorial assistants thing, of that like repatriation of special like specimens and species that are so relevant to them, eventually trying to like figure out ways to do that kind of shared ownership the same way we do. I guess we don't have the ownership of the Indigenous cultural heritage collection. We're holding it in trust for communities because we can take care of it a bit better with having experts in knowing how to take care of these objects, kind of having the same thing, but on that other life sciences side of things.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. That's kind of all the questions we have at the moment. So we'll give our attendees a last minute to type in any questions that you have. But while we give them that minute, maybe both of you could tell us just a little bit about how you ended up at the RSM.
So I'm actually originally from Newfoundland. I moved here 8 years ago as a grad student with Corey Sheffield. And then in my second year of being a grad student with him, this job opened up and I applied for it and got it. Then spent a year of 16 hours a day in this building, working all day and then doing a master's student all night, and then just stuck with it ever since.
Wow. Wow. You must be really passionate about what you do.
Yeah, started here about 3 years ago. So yeah, my background and degrees were all in biology. I'm from Regina here originally, so it's nice to be living and working at home. But yeah, kind of moved around between some conservation and management government organizations, and then this curator job opened up, and the mix between outreach and research and collections is a pretty attractive position. question. So it's nice
Absolutely.
to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. We don't seem to have any more questions coming in, but I'd just like to reiterate a few comments. So someone named Ashgan says, hi, Ryan. Ryan Fisher, it's an honor to see you here. As many people I worked with at Parks Canada and while I was at the U of S spoke highly of you and your birding knowledge, especially while doing bird surveys with Parks Canada in the early spring morning. So thank you. But yeah, I want to thank you both for taking the time today to tell us a little bit about all the amazing things that the RSM does. And it really is a hub of prairie research and collections. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And to our attendees, thank you so much for catching today's webinar. Check out the PCAP YouTube channel for some of those past webinars that I mentioned. There's a huge resource there. I think we've got almost 200 webinars recorded there. And then also check out the PCAP website for other things happening in the future. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Yeah.
Bye.